Namaste, friends. Good evening, good morning. Welcome to another edition of Home and the World, or as we ended last time, we say at home in the world. So, continuing our conversation, before we go to the question for this segment, Dr. Paranspe, in 1 minute, can you just summarize what we just discussed in our previous segment? So, your time starts now.
So I just wanted to say India's gripe against the US comes from a mistaken set of expectations, as well as not a proper understanding of the history of the relationship. And we have to move from a sentimental to a pragmatic, should I say, approach to the Indo-US relationship. And furthermore, as I set it up, India has benefited more from the United States in the last 50 years than from any other country in every respect possible, but especially materially. And if we understood this, we would be more appreciative of just how precious and important for our future this relationship is.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paranspe. So, taking a cue from that, my next question to you is for you to just go back in your own time as a graduate student, and then as somebody who completed his PhD and started teaching, and then decide to come back. So, can you just tell us a little bit about your journey and your own experience in the US, like you did for China?
Yes, so this is, I guess, a very important question, certainly for me, but even for people who want to understand where I'm coming from, where my article was written, the perspective from which it was written. And it's so easy to say, oh, you love the US, whatever, that, you studied there after all. And it's so easy to say that, the US wants to control the world by, offering these sops to people. Now, the same charge has been made against Abhijit Dipke of the Cockroach Janta Party. Somebody's asked him, show us your degree, who paid for your education, and so forth. So I'm going to start on that note because I want to say this very clearly that I was 19 when I was admitted to the US in a master's program after a BA in India, and a BA in which I had, at the end of which I had 3 years of undergraduation and 11 years of school. So I had 14 years of total, school plus undergraduate education as opposed to 16, which was the normal minimum, 12 years of school and 4 years of college. And yet I got admission. And what is more, not in one place, but in more than one. I even got admission in Columbia, but there was no aid. I got a letter from Edward Said, no less. And the other interesting thing is I didn't have to pay a cent, nor did my parents. I'm told Abhijit Dipke took a loan. I didn't have to take any loan. So my dad, who funded my education in India in St. Stephen's College, was telling me, my elder brother was in IIT Bombay. I was in St. Stephen's. So at one time, there was a lot of tuition that was being paid. The point I'm trying to make is India, the country that I love, what did I get? I was excluded from all benefits of the state because of the reservation and other policies, as it were. I went to a private college, I went to a private school. I didn't benefit from our welfare state directly. And so, in a way, I can easily say India gave me nothing in terms of, my education. I mean, my parents paid for it through their nose, as it were, because my schooling was also in Bishop Cotton's, a private school. And the US, imagine that, US taxpayers, because I went to a state school funded by the taxpayers of the state of Illinois, a state I had not even heard of. I'd heard of Chicago, I had not heard of Illinois. I got admission, I got a full fee waiver, and in addition, I got a teaching assistantship, teaching English to Americans. And Americans who were older than I was. I mean, this is a, completely unimaginable situation if you really were to think about it. And, it was so revealing to me that when I went to get my MA transcript, I was told that, your MA transcript we would love to release it to you, but we haven't got your BA transcript. And I realized that when I got admission, my BA degree had not been awarded because you apply 1 year in advance. So here's a person with a second year BA honors course work from a college in India applying to the US for a graduate studies program, for an MA, not only getting admission, but can you imagine if I had told them I had dropped out of my BA, I didn't finish my BA, I would still have got my MA. I would have had to write a petition saying, I flunked out or I got my admission, so I didn't finish my BA. They don't care. And this is an eye opener, a complete eye opener to people who don't understand what the US stands for. Now you can make this point that they calculated that one day you would become a staunch supporter of strong Indo-US relations. No, this is not intelligent thinking. This is crazy thinking. Because when I was in the US, by the way, I was a big critic of America. You know, in some ways I still am. I mean, the American system can be brutal. And of course, there's a book called The Ugly American about all the terrible things the US has done in the world. But I can tell you, I have studied different empires and imperialism. The terrible things the US has done in the world are no more terrible than the other empires, than what the British did in the world, what the Chinese have done in their own backyard to their own people, what the Russians did. There was a Russian Empire. I mean, the USSR was imperial. The Turkish Empire, what they did, the many Islamic empires, the horrors that we experienced in India. Imperialism is not a tea party, please. It's a terrible thing. Roman imperialism, all these empires, they were terrible. They did terrible things to people all over the world. And, well, there were empires in India. I mean, Ashoka did terrible things to the Kalingas. They say the soil there is still red. I've been there. The slaughter was so great that the earth turned red. So, this whole history, Mahabharata is blood-soaked. Read the Mahabharata. We are the land of ahimsa, but we are not, our history is no less violent than any history in the world. Now, this doesn't exonerate. All I'm trying to say is imperialism, maintaining power, being a hegemon in the world. Do you know what the Turks did? There was an Armenian genocide. It was unimaginable, the horrors of it. What the Nazis did. So I'm just saying imperialism is a terrible thing. But the point I'm trying to make is that to imagine that the US had already planned that you give admission to some unknown chap from somewhere, give them an, whatever tuition waiver, you give them an assistantship so that they later become a US supporter. This logic doesn't work because most people educated in the US are critics of the US. So, no, it's a different system. That's why I said the US empire is different. They wanted the so-called best and brightest from all over the world. And they still want them, by the way, despite all the obstacles. And I realized there is no barrier to your achievement in the US if you have A, what they want, and B, what it takes to give it to them. So anyhow, it takes a long time for these insights to coalesce because it's taken me 50, 60 years. And I can tell you when I went to the US, that was the time when the US hostages were in Iran. In 79, there was an Islamic revolution. And in 1980, there was an election in which, the year I went to the US, in which the Democrats lost. There was a very nice man in the US White House, President Jimmy Carter. He lost. Ronald Reagan came in. So, I have seen this whole trajectory of America and what's happening in Iran too. I guess I have a, 40, 50-year telescope to understand it. And in 1775, in the bicentennial year, I was, in a way, listening to Voice of America the day Saigon fell and America vacated from Vietnam, from South Vietnam. And all these months I was listening to the radio, Voice of America, which was full of lies because they were saying the Americans were winning. And they just picked up and left, like they left from Afghanistan, if you remember. one fine day they just left. So it's a complicated situation to be a superpower in the world. But the point I'm trying to make is that no other country in the world would have given me the kind of opportunities a completely unknown person from India, you apply, and you got this chance. And I got a free education. And not just that, not only what I learned in class, but the values I have today, the work ethic, not chalta hai, you know. If you say something, you better do it. Or if you can't do it, you apologize. And now, the second part of your question, I want to answer that, I'm one of the few people who, the day I had my PhD in hand, I came back to India. So no one can say, oh, tum to bike hue ho. I've given my life to India. I have trained thousands of students. I've had, so many PhDs that I've guided, so many MPhils. So, I can say I put my you know, money where my mouth is. I believed in India. I've seen India's rise, and it's a spectacular rise, by the way. The India of 1975, of the emergency, which I remember, and today's India, zameen asman ka farak hai. So, the point I'm trying to make is that I'm neither prejudiced nor am I biased. In other words, I have no anti India prejudice because I've actually given my life to this country, to that country, India, since I'm recording from the US. And I don't have some inherent, pro American orientation because, as I said, I've been through all these phases and I've seen this society up close. So that's my personal interaction with the US. And today I see things very clearly. And that's why I wanted to say that the US is an empire, no doubt, but it's an empire with a difference.
Well, the so when we, I think even in Asia, China is an empire. They're also slowly, I mean, you would agree with me, making their way, trying to push everyone's buttons, their neighbors. So isn't all these imperial countries, empires have similar goals? Whether it's obviously they look after them, their interests. I don't, like you said, why would they really look after the other countries' interests at all? So how is it different from,
Exactly. So this requires a bit of unpacking, but
yeah?
the best comparison will be with the British Empire, and we can talk about that maybe in the next episode. But just one more little thing going back to the, Indo-American relationship. We started on a wrong note. We started on a false note. And very few people in India have read this amazing article written in the Le Monde Diplomatique. It's a French international magazine in which John F. Kennedy wrote an article which was published in the English language in 1958. He was Senator Kennedy then, before he became president. And one of the things he says is that we want a long lasting partnership with India. This was 1958, okay? Because it's a democracy and we can do for India what we did for Germany and Japan, which is, after defeating Germany and Japan, the US contributed to their development. They helped them rebuild their societies, their industries. They gave them grants, they gave them aid, and they bought their products. So both, as you know, Japan and Germany, their rise, their economic success is based on selling goods and selling advanced, say, engineering for Germany, cars and other things. Japan, early Sony, Sanyo, all of those white goods and other things, basically to the US, right? And China's rise is also because it became the manufacturing hub of the world, but its number one consumer destination, its number one, customer was the US and is the US even today. Temu, Shine, whatever, they find every which way to flood the US market.
Why
So
even Walmart?
Walmart, most products are made in China because US manufacturing is dead. Anyhow, so I'm trying to make a point that Kennedy, even before John F. Kennedy, a charismatic young man who was then the youngest president of the US, you know, stretched his hand out to India. India was offered a seat in the United Nations Security Council, which Nehru wanted to build this grand, Asian coalition and, anti-imperialist coalition. Nehru was a socialist, you see, and he deferred to China. And in 1962, China invaded us. You talked about Chinese imperialism. The moment Mao, Chairman Mao, captured power in China in their revolution in 1949, China became imperialist. In a way, it gobbled up Tibet, it gobbled up Inner Mongolia, Manchuria, whatever these territories were. And its territory, when it became from 1949, in the next 4 or 5 years, its territory got double. So empires expand to occupy territory, okay? But the US doesn't. When I said it's an empire with a difference, I'm going to come to that in a moment. Well, it does and it doesn't. So I'll explain how. But what I'm trying to say is we started on a wrong note. And when China invaded India, Nehru wrote these abject, craven, begging letters to Kennedy saying, please save us. We're going to get overrun. We're going to lose. China had already invaded what we today call Arunachal. Nehru thought we were going to lose Assam. You can read these letters, Le Monde Diplomatique. Maybe we will post links. And he had this superior attitude to America because he was very British. He went to a public school. He was at Harrow, then at Cambridge. So, this was a completely wrong idea. And even today, the Indian Foreign Service has this slightly superior attitude to America, which is completely misplaced, for example. My point is really that we had these tremendous opportunities. We squandered them, and then we had to toe the Soviet line because Indira Gandhi swung even farther left towards the Soviets, and we've been in the Soviet camp in the first Cold War, and today we are dilly-dallying and vacillating. So we have to go into the history of anti-Americanism in India. It started with Nehru, and I would think that the right, the Sangh Parivar, also has a deep distrust of the United States. And that is partly because I don't think they've had a deeper understanding of America. They don't understand what America stands for. They haven't studied the documents of the American independence struggle. They haven't understood, they haven't read maybe de Tocqueville, you know, how the American system works. They haven't understood. They only see the selfishness, the intervention, the support for dictators all over the world and so forth. Even in our own region, they support Pakistan. But this is based only on a partial understanding of what the US is or stands for.
Wow, that's quite something. You know, your I can see how this has been such a personal journey for you. And the U.S. has a very deep meaning, and now that you're back there, how things are coming back in a different context, different era, if you would see. So it'll be quite interesting to see how this pans out for you personally. And and yes, I think what you just mentioned about how our foreign policy has been a bit confused, whether it's to do with the US or present day Russia. So maybe in the next segment we can really talk about maybe what India can do. I know we've been quite critical in these two segments. So why not maybe offer some suggestions?
Oh, yes. I mean, that's in a way above my pay grade. I try to analyze things, as I told you, because, there are competent people in the ME and elsewhere, and it's not our job to give advice, but to create understanding from which the
Yes.
best, I would say, the best practices and the best outcomes can emerge. But, I wanted to say that the empire with a difference, I can, maybe sum it up. When I was in the US, I saw the personal computer revolution with my own eyes. The first PC was born, in the early 1980s when I was there. And now we see the AI revolution right in front of my eyes. So, and this is my clue to why the US is an empire with a difference. And maybe with that, we can end this episode. Thank you, Gayatri ji. And please join us soon in Home and the world, or at home in the world, as you like. And do like, share, and subscribe to our channel, and write in with your comments, suggestions, or if there's any article you want us to discuss, we'll be happy to delve deeper into it. With those words, thank you. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you.